Daredevil Born Again, the whole season, part one. Let's get into it. Hello, YouTube. Axiom Man here once again. And we got the entire Daredevil Born Again on Disney Plus season completed. But it's not complete, right? We know, as I said in my last video, that the first 9 episodes were one part of an 18-part series. Now, we don't know, or if you do, let me know in the comment section, please. I know I can Google it, but it's a lot more fun reading in the comment section. It's supposed to be one entire story told over 2 parts, is my understanding, but they didn't label it part 1, part 2. When you see it on screen, it's just Daredevil Born Again, and the first 9 episodes dropped. But we know that there's another 9 episodes that are currently in production, and they are part of the whole. So I don't know what to call this as far as season 4, because we had 3 seasons on Netflix, and then they switched over to Disney, and now we have another one. Or if it's just Daredevil Born Again, season 1, part 1. I don't know. And I don't really think that matters. I also said that in my last one. It doesn't really matter. What we got here is a 9-episode story. And that's what I want to cover, episodes 1 all the way through 9. So let's get into it. First and foremost, I want to say that I loved it. I loved it. From beginning to end, does it have its issues? Yes. But me personally, and of course, this video is me personally also, it's my opinion. But me personally, I had issues with the Netflix series. Were they amazing? Were they awesome? Were they groundbreaking? Yes, they were. Yes, they were. That's not even my opinion. I mean, ask anybody out there that's seen them, right? Fans, casual fans, even non-fans. I have a buddy who doesn't like any of this stuff by just pop culture, comic book content property, and I almost forced him to watch it because of the Punisher thing. He's a bit of a gun guy. We call him Gore, and he loved it. He loved it. So the general consensus with the Netflix series, all 3 seasons, is that they were amazing. They were awesome, solid. Just nothing but good. With some critique. Once again, I will always say this: nothing's above critique. So will I nitpick the hell out of something? Sure. But that also depends. When I nitpick the hell out of something, it's whether I liked it or not. Now, I nitpick the hell out of everything, whether I like it or not. But when I don't like it, I have a tendency, admittedly, guilty as charged, to get a little bit harsher with it. That's just the nature of the beast sometimes with these things. It's because if you deliver something that's solid and good, you are more willing to forgive some of the plot holes and the MacGuffins and the things that just stand out like sore thumbs, right? But when you give us something solid as a whole, well, we can forgive those things. Can we talk about the negatives? Sure. And I love to sometimes talk about that stuff. It's fun, actually, to talk, to poke fun at this. But that's just how it is. And then on the other side of the same coin, when something's bad, yeah, we're going to focus on all the bad stuff because, we can't believe what we just watched. And so I get the nature of that conversation and that discussion. But when it comes to Daredevil Born Again, I think that it was solid, not above critique, and I will talk about that. And I mean, yes, let's get into a little bit of that. As I mentioned, is it on par with Netflix? I think so. I think so. As a whole, the series as a whole, 9 episodes. We haven't seen the next 9 episodes, but as a whole, I think it's cohesive. It's easy to follow, and you can see what's happening. The complexities of it, as complex as it is with so many characters in it. I mean, think about it. It's so many characters that it should go off the rails if you don't have a good writing team, and yet it really doesn't. I mean, that's my opinion. When you consider that it has the main characters, Daredevil, Matt Murdock, Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, and then it has his wife Vanessa, and then it has Muse, and then it has Bullseye, and it has new characters, old characters, Punisher, big characters. I think they did a very good job of balancing that out and yet giving us a cohesive story that we can follow from point A to Z without too much of like a head scratch. I think so. That being said, what I said in one of my videos, you have to go see it. uh, Plug in. I straight out hated how they did episodes 5 and 6. Go watch the video. I say it in its entirety, but I will summarize it here. I don't know what the hell they were thinking, dropping 5 and 6 together when they had nothing to do with each other. When you saw the lineup and you saw what was coming, you made the assumption, and I get it. Sometimes assumptions, hey, when you make an assumption, you make an asshole out of yourself, right? But that said, come on now. Comic book fans, comic book content fans, whether that be paper, reading, television, movies, there's certain nuances that when you see them, your mind just automatically goes to, an assumption. And this was a safe one. Disagree with me if you want, but when I saw that they were the series premiere was 2 episodes, sure, because you're trying to get people back into Daredevil. But then you saw that they were releasing out of the entire 9, 2 together. So you made the assumption like, ooh, this is going to be a 2-part series. This is going to be good. This is going to be good. And then you watch them and you're like, what the? They had nothing to do with each other. Hence the video I made. That, even that said, the series as a whole was awesome. And yet, once I watched the whole thing, once I watched the entire thing from beginning to end, episodes 1 through 9, I could not help. I could not. I'm beating a dead horse here, ladies and gents, and I can't help myself. I'm like, what the hell were you thinking? Dropping 5 and 6 like that? It doesn't make any sense. If you had not done that, there's no issues with this entire series. None, at least not in my opinion. Like, and let me tell you why. I know I said I was going to summarize what I said in that video, but I need to say it here because I'm talking about the series as a whole now. Episodes 1 through 9, the part 1 of an 18 episode series. Comic books do this all the time. Fans understand this. And if you're a casual fan or not so much a casual fan, maybe you watch the content on television and movies, very deeply and all that. I respect that too. I respect any level of fandom, honestly. Do I sometimes get on my high horse and get a little snobby because I do read the comics? Of course, guilty as charged. But when reading comics, you get one-off stories in the overall story. So like, let me just give you an example. Amazing Spider, or let's stick on topic, right? Daredevil. Daredevil has the regular run of Daredevil from Daredevil 1 all the way to whatever run. And then it breaks off into different runs. It starts off with another number 1, and then that series goes. And then they'll reboot it, and then it'll go another number 1, and it'll keep going. But there's also like one-off stories. The perfect example is Frank Miller and John Romita Jr.'s Man Without Fear 6-issue miniseries. So these things are done, and not just in Marvel, but in every publication where you can take a character and you can have one-off stories, just like little side adventures that sometimes become canon and sometimes they don't. One of the biggest examples of this is the Killing Joke in Batman. Batman has 2 different runs for that matter. It has the Batman run and the Detective Comics run. And yet they told a one-off story called The Killing Joke. This is not the video to give the details, but just within the context of what I'm saying here, all of a sudden that became canon to both storylines. Doesn't always happen, but we understand here, or what I'm trying to relay is that sometimes you can have one-off stories and that's okay. The story I'm referring to, or the episode I'm referring to, is the bank heist. Episode 5 was a bank heist that really, yes, it was tied into the overall, as I mentioned, as I was trying to explain. but it really didn't have anything to do with the overall story. It didn't have anything to do. It did and it didn't, but that's okay because that's what I was referring to. It felt, as a comic book reader myself, it felt like it was a one-off story. And then the Muse story felt like a mini series, right? Like a mini series, kind of, you know, just a two-parter. You read it off to the side, and it'll have an impact later. It may not. Maybe it's just a new writer that's trying to introduce a story into the mythos of said character, and that's okay. So it felt like the bank heist thing was like a one-off, and then the Muse story was a two-parter, almost like a mini series. And why why they released them the way they did? Why not just release five the way just as a regular episode, and then do 6 and 7, since that was literally the Muse storyline, part 6 and part 7. It's always gonna blow my mind why they did that. That's so, oh, I'm sorry, but that's stupid that they did that. Because I love the series. That it's like it stands out like a metaphorical sore thumb, considering that the whole thing is solid, it's good. Why did you do that one thing? It didn't ruin the series for me, but and yet I'm like, what were you guys thinking? Anyways, as I said, beating a dead horse, I can keep going on about this. My friends know that I just can't wrap my head around why they were released that way, but I'll just leave it at that. As I mentioned, after they got through with that debacle, they got back on track. Not just solidly, but it was great. Episodes 7, 8, and 9 all followed, all went back. Well, 7 was a part 2 of 6. It was the Muse storyline. One of the things I loved about the Muse storyline is I've heard certain friends say, and I do agree with them, that Muse should have been a bigger part of this story, especially the way they kind of advertised it. But I didn't have a problem with that because of what I said earlier. It felt like just like a short miniseries that contributed to the story, this story. So I was okay with that. So 7, 8, and 9 kind of brought us back on track because by the end of 7 into 8, and then eventually the finale, it came back on track. That's the best way I can put it. I, as a viewer, felt that we're back on track, baby. Okay. And I love those episodes. Back it up. Back the train up. Back on track. A comment. I loved all of them, but my statement still stands about the whole releasing 5 and 6 together. That's just dumb. I'll never get over that. Every episode was good. It told a story, and they all had a reason. They all had an impact on the overall story. I won't take that away from it. So I loved it. Like, I like the fact that that was the case, but I'll still say that the whole back on track statement or sentiment is true, on my opinion, when it came to episodes 7, 8, and 9. The to be continued aspect of it, I enjoyed because I know we should know, if you've been keeping track of some of this, is that we know that there's another 9 episodes coming, and they're part of this story. How could it not be? If you watch episode 9, they're not just going to leave it like that. And as I said in my last video, there's a lot of talk about they're going to release one episode every year of Daredevil. I don't know how plausible that is with contracts and real world things, right? Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, if they want to go off and do other movies and films and TV shows, who knows, right? Wishful thinking is wishful thinking. I would love it. There's no doubt that I would love it if they just committed themselves forever to this franchise and to these characters. But we know that doesn't always work out that way. So I don't know how much that is wishful thinking and how much of that is reality. But there you go. I also thought that there was a good mixture of action and lawyer stuff. Lawyer stuff, right? As a Batman fan, and you can make the comparison between Marvel's Daredevil and DC's Batman. that's a great discussion, argument, insert whatever adjective you want there. But the mixture of one of the things we say with Batman is that we don't only want to see Batman. We also want to see Bruce Wayne. So the saying goes with Daredevil is that we do want to see Daredevil, but we also want to see Matt Murdock doing his thing. And I think that this series did an excellent job of mixing both, of balancing both. Very similar to the Netflix, which is why I said earlier that I think that it was on par with the Netflix. Netflix did it in 13 episodes. They're doing it in 9, technically 18. But I think that was a good mix or a good balance. The comic book aspect of the show itself, this is a very personal thing. I know that not a lot of people agree with this. Or maybe they do. This is just me going off of my close personal friends. So I'm projecting here to my YouTube channel, to my YouTube watchers and listeners. One of the nitpicks I had with the Netflix series, as awesome as it was, is that I kind of wish, and I get it because it was more grounded, but I wanted it to be sometimes a little bit more comic bookish. I wanted him to use the billy clubs to see the, when he does the in the comics when he does the whip and it flips all over the place. The string, for lack of a better term, but when he connects them and then he takes them apart and he does the that's right, that's a real sound effect. We saw a lot more of that in this series. I love that, the billy clubs, the use of the iconic Daredevil billy clubs. I'm sorry, Netflix, but you showed them. He never really used them, not in comic book form, if you will. This show did a much better job of that. The CGI had to be used for it, and that's, I think, where a lot of people kind of are on the fence, where I was like, yeah, but the CGI sucked, and I'm like, I can't disagree with you when it comes to that, honestly. But you see, for me personally, I don't care because I got to see it. And it was something that I was aching to see in the other ones, and I never got it. So I am totally biased. Well, I mean, I'm biased in in all of this. But that was one thing that I was so happy to see, the CGI. And another thing that I did want to bring up is a lot of the bait and switch. So the series as a whole had a lot of bait and switch going on because we saw the images in the marketing with Karen Page and Foggy Nelson, and then there you go. Foggy dies in the first episode. Karen Page leaves. They're fighting, and wait a minute, all the hype around the original crew coming back. Goodbye, bait and switch. I was kind of 50-50 about that. I liked it and I didn't like it. And then there's the whole bait and switch with Agent Poindexter / Bullseye. Well, he's gone. He's in jail. He's in prison. And then, boom, he comes back, towards the end of the season. Whether that was expected or not, it is a little bit of a bait and switch, I guess, if you will. And that happens a lot in this series. I thought it was going to bother me, especially after the Foggy Nelson, the original trio. But it didn't. Actually, I liked it. It kept me guessing. It may have bothered some. It didn't me, honestly. I liked it. I liked the bait and switch. I think they did it very eloquently. I did that, or maybe that's getting a little bit too fancy wordish. Not even fancy wordish, but that's too much. I think they did it smartly. I think they were smart in how they bait and switched the audience to the point where you're kind of guessing as to what's going to happen. And that's okay. I mean, I love that. The fact that it kept me engaged and it kept me guessing, like, oh, like, I don't know. Like, they keep doing this bait and switch, and now I don't know. It's not just about subverting expectations, which I hate it when people, writers, and shows subvert expectations simply for the sake of subverting expectations, and it has no rhyme or reason. That drives me up the wall. It pisses me off. But this did it in a way where it never did that to me, at least not to me. It kept me engaged to the point where, okay, where is this going? And this character can go left or right. This character, and then even surprised me at times where I was like, whoa, I didn't know. The BB report, when she kind of went against her nature, I was like, yo. And then the the right hand woman of Wilson Fisk. I said this in my last video. There's the young kid who's he's in it. He's in already. And then there's the more experienced woman who I didn't know she was going to betray the commissioner. That was like, oh man. The reason it took me by surprise is not necessarily it took me by surprise, but it was because I didn't know which way what was gonna happen there. And that happened a lot throughout the series. And I like that. On that note, there was also the character development. I mentioned this earlier. Juggling so many characters and having to deal with so many personalities. We saw it with the Russo brothers in Infinity War and Endgame, even in Civil War and other projects of the MCU throughout the years. This was no different, in my opinion. Sure, it's a smaller scale, it's not as huge of a cinematic spectacle, but nonetheless, it needed that touch because you're dealing with so many characters, so much depth, and I think with what time they had and the way they stretched it out and the way they kind of had to shrink it down. And of course, let me say this, there was a lot of production stuff happening in the background with rewrites and reshoots and cancellations of entire episodes. Let's just redo this. There was all that real stuff happening with this show. So considering what we saw, did it feel choppy at times? Yeah, absolutely. There was times when it just felt choppy, where you can kind of tell, I think there was more story there. I think that was totally edited, and the story was supposed to go somewhere else, but then they switched it out and it went this direction. So there was kind of a lot of that sometimes, but not to the point that, as I already mentioned, that it didn't make the story cohesive. I think they did a good job of taking what they had and making it work. Now that's the true sign of a good writing team, is okay, how do we Humpty Dumpty this? Because this is a mess. This is a mess. And am I making an assumption in that it was a mess right from the beginning? Sure, I am. But given the right now, as it stands, the MCU and the history and so many people and so many suits and writers and reshoots and all that, it is a little bit of a mess, which is amazing considering what we got. I mean, I commend that. I don't knock that, especially now after what I saw as a series. I'm like, yes, that's how you get things done, ladies and gents. There you go. Well done. Well done. There you go. That's my opinion on that. And I'll end this video with something that I was kind of struggling with about including or not. But hey, it's my channel. It's my video. I'm going to go ahead and dive a little bit into it. And that is the politics of it as it pertains to what we saw in the series and what's really happening in our country. Touchy subject, right? Hence what I just said. When I was looking at that, I like to consider myself kind of neutral. It's easy to say, right? It's easy to say that I'm neutral if you don't know me personally. But what I saw with the whole Wilson Fisk and him taking over and manipulating and becoming a tyrant eventually, I mean, he was always a tyrant, right? And then, Daredevil's final speech at the end where he says, rebel, resist, well, given the current two presidencies, whether it's Biden or the current Trump, when you take a look at those two presidencies and the divide that was caused, you can kind of see where one person or one side of the political spectrum, whether you wear a blue tie or a red tie in the good old US of A, this is strictly United States of America politics, whether you wear a blue tie or a red tie, you can kind of see where a blue tie would say, well, that's us. And then a red tie would say, well, that's us. And they're talking about the same person, and then they see the villain and they're like, that's the villain. That's the villain. And they're also talking about the same person, right? I like the point I'm trying to make here is I like the fact that that's where we are kind of united, is that we think that we're so different and yet we're not, because we see the villain the way we want to see the villain. Think about that, because some people on the show loved Wilson Fisk and never wavered. Some, even though we didn't see a lot of the New Yorkers, but we kind of did throughout the BB report. And then others just completely hated the guy, right? And then at the end, certain people were proven right, and yet they didn't care. They still wanted, they still supported him through fear, through ambition, through what. And then there's the Daredevil, right? But then, I mean, you can look at what happened during the Biden administration, and people felt different, right? The red ties felt like they were rebelling, they were resisting, and now the blue ties feel like they're rebelling, they're resisting. So I like that. I like how they almost kept it even keel. Some might argue that, oh, well, this is clearly Democrat representation. But others might say, like, well, this is clearly how we felt about, and this is Republican representation. I like that. I like the fact that you can see both sides to this argument. Whether you agree with it or not, you can see where you can feel represented in many aspects of what you see on screen. That's okay. We are both the hero and the villain of our own stories. Our friends and family, out there, we are, the daredevils, and sometimes we're the kingpins. That's human nature. I'm getting a little preachy here, but I know from personal experience that sometimes I am the daredevil and sometimes I am the kingpin. I can be a Matt Murdock, and yet, hey, I'm not foolish enough, and I am humble enough to admit that I can also be a Wilson Fisk. I can also be a kingpin. That's just me. I can talk about everyone else and say it's just human nature. Sure, but this whole diatribe here that you're hearing, even though I'm just kind of talking in generalities, is really about me. I can be both. I can and have been both. And I like seeing it on screen. I like being challenged like that, especially when it comes to something I love, like comic book characters. I love that. I love real world implications as they pertain to me. And I'll finish that sentiment with this. Comic books, to a certain extent, have always been political to a certain extent, depending on the character. Not all of them. I agree with that. Not all of them. But they have always shown messaging. They've always been, to use the current term and nomenclature or whatever term, woke. That's a huge misconception. Now, has the current media and all that used that to their advantage to push certain agendas? Yes, and it's so damn annoying. But to say that comic books have never been entered into the realm of politics and social issues, it's just naive. It really is, because I mean, you're talking about like Green Arrow finding his sidekick shooting drugs right on the cover. You have X-Men, one of my favorite comic book titles, literally getting into discrimination about being different, right? Back in the 60s. The allegory that, MLK was an allegory of, Professor X, or vice versa. And then, that Magneto was an allegory of Malcolm X, a more extreme of that same messaging. And they were friends, and yet they were at odds with each other. So there's that. Now, is that how Stan Lee and Jack King Kirby intended it? Maybe, maybe not. That's arguable. But what's not arguable is that these themes have always been inserted and a part, not just inserted, but a part of these characters, these comic books. So when I see this on screen, does it sometimes rub me the wrong way? Yes. But it's okay. It's okay as long as it's being done when the story is first. That's the biggest thing. Daredevil, Born Again, seemed to me like it told story first, and it just let the story unfold. and then you took those messages however you wanted. As I said, you felt that you were part of that team or that team. You felt like that was the bad guy, that was the bad guy, this was the good guy, this was the good guy, and that's okay. See, that's the point, is that comic book heroes and villains have always, to a certain extent, been this complex, been this amazing, creatures, just works of fiction that tell us and help us explore, like, our own psyche, our own, thoughts and processes, and like how we think about this and that. Again, I'm getting a little preachy here at the end of the video, but I'm okay with that, because that's what this season did. And there's a lot of properties that make me feel this way. You're going to hear me say a lot of this stuff in the future, but I wanted to say it here, and let's just go ahead and end it, because this video is getting long enough as it is. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you stayed until the very end. You didn't like shut it off saying like, oh man, this guy's going. If you did, that's okay. And you fast forwarded. But as always, Axiom Man Comics viewers, collect what you love what you collect. I'll see you guys in the next one.